I wanted to introduce it. It's a story many of you may have heard about, and some of you maybe haven't. It's the story of Bible John, who was a serial killer in Glasgow, Scotland in the late 1960s. He's believed to be responsible for at least 3 deaths, if not more. And in this story, I'm going to talk about the deaths, the murders, and then I'm going to give some information about the women, the victims, who they were, their families, and then I'm going to also talk about the investigation. And to wrap it up, the very last part of this series will be about the years that followed and cold cases and people searching through this case and trying to get information. And people have come up with this idea that this one man was probably the killer and that it was a cover-up by police because he was well known. You'll hear about parts of that throughout the video. They believe that this was a cover-up, and they believe that people inside the police department were responsible for covering this up. Hey everybody, welcome to the channel, True Crime Stories. If you're new to the channel, please hit that like button and subscribe so you can hear more. Thanks for stopping by. This is the story of Bible John. Now, Bible John is an unidentified serial killer who is believed to have murdered 3 young women between the years of 1968 and 1969 in Glasgow, Scotland. I'm reading this from Wikipedia. The victims of Bible John were all young brunette women between the ages of 25 and 32. They all were believed to have met the murderer at the Barrowland Ballroom, which was a dance hall and music venue. The perpetrator has never been identified, and the case remains unsolved and is considered one of the most extensive manhunts in the Scottish criminal history. This case would prove to be the first time in the history of Scotland that they used a publication of a composite drawing of a suspected murderer. This unidentified serial killer became known as Bible John due to his having repeatedly quoted from the Bible and condemning any form of adultery while he was in the company of his final victim. And I'll get to that in a minute about how someone came to give details about this man. This one is Patricia Docker. On February the 23rd, 1968, the naked body of 25-year-old nurse Patricia Docker was found in the doorway of a garage by a man on his way to work that morning. This was in Battlefield, Glasgow, Scotland. The location of her body was only a few yards from her home. Her body bore evidence of extensive blunt force trauma, particularly to her head and face. She had been strangled to death with a strong ligature, which the police believed was a belt. Her handbag, watch, and clothing were all missing. Her clothing was never found. Her handbag was discovered in the river, and her watch was discovered in a small pool of water near the murder scene. Extensive door-to-door inquiries in the area produced a witness who remembered hearing a female screaming, "Leave me alone." Little hard evidence was discovered at the crime scene. Nonetheless, an ambulance worker who helped to pick up the body recognized this woman and told police that she was a nurse who worked at Mearnskirk Hospital. I hope I said that right. Mearnskirk Hospital nearby. The victim was identified by her father the next day. Docker was a married mother of one, although she was estranged from her husband at the time and had been staying at the home of her mother. On the night of her murder, she informed her parents that she would be spending the evening at the Majestic Ballroom on Hope Street. She wanted to go out dancing, and she told them that she would be home later that night. For reasons unknown, she chose not to go to the Majestic Ballroom that night and instead ended up at the Barrowland Ballroom. When she failed to return home that night, her parents assumed that she had gone home with a friend. A post-mortem conducted by Gilbert Forbes at the University of Glasgow Medical School confirmed the cause of death was strangulation. They did not believe at that time that there was sexual assault. Furthermore, the stage of rigor mortis upon her body at the time indicated she had likely died very soon after leaving the Barrowland Ballroom. Investigators believe the perpetrator had probably grabbed her, repeatedly punching her in the head and face as she screamed, trying to get away. He then proceeded to strangle her to death and left her naked body with nothing left nearby but a shoe. Now, the fact that they believe that someone claimed to have heard a woman scream, "Leave me alone," they believe that this woman put up a fight, and this may have been the reason that she was not raped, is that his intention was to rape her, but her screaming and fighting, maybe he was afraid someone did hear her, and he just ended up beating her to death, probably because she could have identified him. The police said that they believe that he grabbed her. I don't think that that was the case. I think that he was walking her home from this ballroom. I think she met him there. They said these other women that, people that had come into contact with him, claimed that he was a gentleman type, that he was very well spoken, very well dressed. He didn't look like a threat, so this young woman probably had danced with him during the evening and he offered to walk her home. I think he did attempt to assault her and she put up a fight, and that's why but he did remove all of her clothing, so it's possible that he did sexually assault her. But anyway, I'll move on to the next woman. On Saturday, August the 16th, 1969, a 31-year-old mother of three named Jemima MacDonald also spent the evening dancing at the Barrowland Ballroom. MacDonald was known as a regular attendee at the Barrowland Ballroom, and according to others who knew her, she would leave her children with her sister, Margaret O'Brien. As midnight approached, she was seen by several people in the company of a young, well-dressed man with a slim build who was described as being around 30 to 35 years of age. He was described as being around 6 foot tall, maybe 6'2". This individual had short, dark hair and spoke with a very distinctive Glasgow accent. He was also known by others who overheard him speaking and others who actually talked to him. He was known to quote the Bible quite a bit, the Old Testament, and talked very in detail about adultery, and seemed to have this outspoken belief that any woman who was there who was maybe married or separated was committing adultery, and he would speak about that. And a lot of people believe that he knew that these women were married. He knew that they were either married or separated or had been divorced, and he targeted them because of that. MacDonald was last seen leaving the ballroom shortly around midnight in the company of this man. They were seen walking towards Landressy Street in the direction of her home. At around 12:40 a.m., O'Brien became concerned when her sister had not yet returned home. Later that day, she was still keeping her sister's children, and her sister hadn't come to get them, and she began to ask around if anyone had seen her sister, and some young children told her that they had heard that a body had been discovered in a derelict tenement building on McKeith Street. It was Saturday night when the sister had gone out, when Jemima MacDonald had gone out to this ballroom and left her children with her sister. Now Sunday comes, all day Sunday comes and goes, and she still hasn't returned home to get her kids. The sister's been asking around the neighborhood, has anyone heard anything? Has anyone seen her? She still hasn't called the police or anything as far as I know. But on Monday morning, she became so concerned that she decided to go down to this old tenement building. She had heard that a body had been seen. And when she goes there, she discovers her own sister's extensively battered, nude body. She goes down to this building just thinking, okay, I'm going to go check this out for myself. And there is her sister's dead body, beaten and battered, laying face down with her shoes and stockings off, laying next to her body. A post-mortem concluded that MacDonald had been raped and beaten, particularly around her head and face. She had been strangled to death with one of her own stockings. Her murder had probably, according to the post-mortem exam, had probably occurred shortly after she left this ballroom. Unlike Docker, the body of MacDonald was fully clothed, although her underclothing had been ripped apart. Now here's a strange thing that I want to bring up about all three of these women who were found. All three of these women had been having their monthly period at the time that they were murdered. Was this just a strange coincidence? I read some comments on Reddit on a small, it was just a very small thread that I found about this, where people were saying, could he have been someone who worked in a local drugstore or a local department store of some type where women may have been going to buy menstrual products, pads, or that type of thing, and that he was aware that these women were coming in there and buying these products. That was just one of those theories that was thrown out there, but that was just a strange thing. Now, police inquired into MacDonald's movements on the night of her murder, and several eyewitnesses came forward who said that they seen her at the Barrowland Ballroom with a man who met the description of the man who had been seen with the other woman who ended up murdered as well. Door-to-door inquiries on McKeith Street produced a woman who said that she also thought that she overheard a woman yelling for help. But the police could not find anything to back that up. So, although the city of Glasgow police noted several striking similarities between these two murders, including that both women had attended the Barrowland Ballroom on the night of their murder, both had been seen in the company of a well-dressed man who fit the description in each case. Very striking similarities in both cases. Despite extensive public appeals, the investigation into the murder of Docker became a cold case very quickly. Police had little information to go on and noted a lack of witnesses. 18 months later, following the discovery of MacDonald, police became aware of striking similarities between these two murders. They also believe that the perpetrator knew the area very well and had quite a bit of knowledge of this area. This is why when I read that one comment on Reddit about could this have been a man who worked in a local department store or drugstore, or maybe he was, well, they said he was very well dressed. Could he have been a local doctor or someone that maybe they trusted and thought of as being? And the fact that he quoted the Bible quite a bit maybe led them to think he was very safe and trustworthy, as no one seemed to know his name, and he got the nickname Bible John. For the first time in a murder investigation in Scotland, a composite drawing of the man with whom MacDonald had last been seen was widely spread through newspapers and was also put on television in an effort to identify him. Both male and female undercover police officers began to go out and perform surveillance at the Barrowland Ballroom. Police surveillance at the ballroom would be terminated in late October of 1969 due to a failure to produce any suspects. Now, later on, it's going to come up that some people within law enforcement, and even a couple of these people who were tasked with being undercover, believe that it was discovered who this man was, and that because he was a well-known local person who was well-known by police, maybe even akin to some of these police officers or someone higher up. They say upper channels or upper class people within the upper ranks of law enforcement came to know who this man was. And this is one of the reasons why it was kind of never really solved. That's a theory that some police officers even have. So now we go on to our next victim. On October the 31st, October 69, a man out walking his dog discovered the body of 29-year-old Helen Puttick behind a tenement building in the Scotstoun district of Glasgow. Her body was found beside a drain pipe in the back garden of Earl Street Flat. Now, this is her home. This was in her backyard. She had been stripped almost naked and had been beaten around her head and face. She was raped and strangled to death using one of her own stockings. The contents of her handbag had been scattered around on the ground, but the handbag itself was missing. Now, this is one woman's clothing was all taken. Everything but one shoe. The second woman's handbag had been taken. Her clothing was left behind, but her handbag was taken. But now the first woman's handbag was later found, and a watch. Maybe this perpetrator took these just to give the impression that it was a robbery. Grass and weed stains upon the sides of Puttick's feet and shoes indicated that she had ran and had put up a ferocious struggle with her killer. At one point, it is believed that she had attempted to climb a wall, a railway embankment. Her body bore a deep bite mark on the upper right thigh. Or could he have become more ferocious with his victims, and this was the next step? It was biting them. And in the case of the two previous women, she was also having her period. And here's something very strange and bizarre. All three women had, one woman had a tampon and the other two had pads. All three had their menstrual material placed upon their body. One was placed upon her forehead, the other two under their arm. So he had taken these items from their body and deliberately placed them on their body at a different location. The evening prior to the murder, Puttick and her sister Jean Langford had gone to the Barrowland Ballroom, where both became acquainted with two men. The surviving sister, Jean, described both men as having gone by the name of John. After being in the company of these two men for around an hour, all four decided to leave the Barrowland and head home. The man who had been Jean's dance partner, who also went by the name of John, walked with them to George Square and got on a bus. Now, this was the last time that they saw him, while Langford, Puttick, and the man who would become known as Bible John all decided to get a taxi cab. The three of them held a taxi cab and set off from Glasgow Cross, making a 20-minute journey toward Langford's home. Langford informed detectives that her sister's companion had been a teetotaler. Now, for those who don't know, a teetotaler is someone who doesn't drink alcohol and who doesn't believe in drinking alcohol, someone who doesn't, who maybe even speaks out against the drink of alcohol. He repeatedly quoted the Old Testament, telling stories of Moses during the time of their conversations. He also referred to Barrowland, now this is the place where he had himself been dancing that night, as a den of iniquity, saying that this was a place where married women came to meet men to commit adultery. And he disapproved of women being there alone. He thought that it seems like the psychological profile of this man was that he had this hatred toward married women, toward women who maybe were divorced or separated. He liked going there to this place himself, but he went there in judgment of these people. He went there not to dance and enjoy himself, but to seek out victims, because he saw these women as lower class. He saw them as sinners. He saw them as just dispensable people. During the time that they were in the cab together and speaking, he talked of his disapproval of married women going out to dance. He was even still talking about this as they were getting their coats that night and putting their coats on to leave. So my question is, why did the two women continue on with him? I don't know. Maybe he offered to pay for a taxi cab for them to be able to get home. Now, Jean Langford described the suspect as being a tall, slim, well-dressed young man who she believed had almost a reddish color hair. In the earlier descriptions of him, they said his hair was darker, but she said she believed his hair was a little bit lighter colored and maybe even had a reddish tint. She said it was cut very neatly and very short. She described him as being somewhere between the ages of 25 and 30 and said that he was around 6 foot tall. She believed that he had said his name was either John Templeton or John Emerson. She said that he was very polite and well-spoken, and that he quoted from the Old Testament quite a bit during their ride home. At one point during the ride home, he explained to the women that the reason he did not drink alcohol was because he had grown up in a very strict home where his parents' attitude toward alcohol was that they did not believe in alcohol, and that his father often talked about alcohol leading to these people taking part in adulterous nature. So this is part of the psychological profiles that he was kind of maybe even rebelling in his own way against his upbringing, against his father's preaching to him about, these things. Langford informed detectives that the man had been slim and tall and well dressed, wearing a brown Reed and Taylor suit. She said he smoked Embassy brand cigarettes. She recalled him mentioning that he was familiar with many of the drinking premises, they were called bars, that he was familiar with several drinking premises in the district of Glasgow, and at one point she thought that he mentioned that he had worked in a laboratory. Now see, could this man have been a pharmacist? Could he have been something to do with the medical field in some way? But he was well dressed. She described his suit as being a well cut. This led them to think that he was probably from a well-to-do family or had money that, made a good living, that could afford to buy these types of suits, where he would go to a tailor and have them made or cut to fit him. That he just came across as someone who was educated and well-dressed. She said that this man had what appeared to be overlapping front teeth, meaning one tooth overlapped the other. However, now this, I'll give my opinion about this after I read it. Workers at the Barrowland Ballroom dismissed this claim, saying that they knew of no such man who had ever come into this place, and that the man that they saw her and her sister leaving with that night had been short with black hair. Now, my opinion is that they knew who this man was. Maybe they didn't know him by name. Maybe they didn't know him, but they knew that he was one of their regular customers. They knew that he came in there quite a bit. Maybe he spent money, and they didn't want to get a bad reputation. Their ballroom getting this reputation of being a place where people didn't want to go to because there was this serial killer on the loose. So they threw off the police and threw off the public with this description that didn't come anywhere near the one that the sister and these other people gave. And that's just my opinion about it. I think that they kind of had an idea that they'd seen this man in their bar or their ballroom before. The last possible sighting of the suspect was made by both the driver and a conductor of a night bus service of that same night. They noticed a young man matching the description given by Langford, standing at a bus at the junction of Dumbarton Road and Grey Street at around 2 a.m. that same night. He seemed to be in a disheveled state. He had mud and grass stains on his jacket. His shoes were dirty, and he had a very dark red stain across his cheek, and underneath his eye appeared to be scratched and red. So now doesn't this lead you, the listener, as it did me, to believe that this is what took part when he was struggling with this last woman? Because they said that she had grass stains on her feet, on her legs. She had tried to run. She had tried to climb to get away. This red streak across his face could have been a scratch, or she'd tried to scratch him. And the bite mark on her thigh, could that be where that blood came from? Remember, she was on her period at the time, so maybe she had blood on her already. Both of these men, witnesses, said that they recalled seeing him pulling at his shirt sleeve, and that it looked as though now this was when men wore cufflinks to keep their cuffs together. and it looked like the cufflink was missing and the two sides of the sleeve were, and he kept trying to pull them together. They said he kept reaching underneath his sleeve of the jacket and pulling at his shirt sleeve. And there was a man's cufflink found beside of Putnam's body, Puttick's body. Now, if this man was well-to-do, as they described, and well-dressed, was there any gentlemen's clothing stores in the area that might recognize someone who came in very tall, who had a suit made, tailored to fit him, and had cufflinks that would have matched the cufflink that they found? Did they go out and do this kind of investigation? This is why so many in the police, the actual police officers and people in the community, believed that there was a cover-up. So both men said that the individual got off of this bus and was last seen walking toward the ferry at the Clyde River at the south side of the city. Now, the murder of Helen Puttick had remarkable similarities to the first two murders. This led everyone to believe that all three of these murders had been committed by the same man. Each of the victims had been a mother to at least one child. Each of these women had met the murderer at the Barrowland Ballroom. Each of these women had their handbags missing at the time that they were murdered. Each of these women had been having their monthly period at the time. Each had been strangled to death. Two of these women had been raped, and it's possible that the first woman also had been raped. The fact that she was completely disclothed. And they had all been strangled to death. In addition, each of these three women had been escorted home that night by this man that they'd met at this ballroom, and each one of them had been murdered within yards of their own homes, within yards of their own front door, back door. Each one of these women had had their sanitary towel or napkin or tampon placed beneath their body or on their body. Within hours of the discovery of the body of Helen Puttick, an additional composite drawing of the suspect was created using the description given by her sister. Langford saw the earlier image that had been created after the murder of Jemima McDonald and believed it was of an excellent likeness of this man. Detective Superintendent Joe Beatty asked the public to closely study this drawing. They asked for anyone to come forward if they recognized anyone who resembled this man. Over 450 hairdressers, barbers in the area were questioned and shown this picture and asked if they may have cut this man's hair. Dentists in the area were also asked to examine their records to see if they had any men, patients who had overlapping front teeth. But nothing was ever found. No one came forward to say that they recognized this man. In June of 1970, police employed PhotoFit. A PhotoFit system is kind of like what we would call today would be kind of like Photoshop or photo editing software that they didn't have at that time, but they used this system in an attempt to try to make a better likeness of the suspect. More than 100 detectives were assigned to work this case, and over 50,000 witness statements would be taken, door-to-door inquiries. Ultimately, 5,000 potential suspects would be questioned within the first year, and Jean Langford attended over 300 identity parades, or what, when you're asked to go look at a police lineup. Many officers believe that the perpetrator had died, had gone to jail, possibly for another offense, or maybe he had moved away. Now, this is where the theory comes in from some of the police officers who were out walking the beat, so to speak, who were out going and being undercover, or who were out doing the actual police work. Some of them believed that senior police officers knew who the man was and that they could identify him from the photograph, and maybe had tipped him off or tipped off his family members, who maybe his father may have been someone well known. And was it possible that he was related to someone high up and was tipped off and was sent away? Could he have been killing people in other cities by that point? Others speculated that he may have simply moved away. Now, this possibility prompted police to circulate copies of the drawing throughout Britain, throughout the United Kingdom. They gave copies to the British Army, Navy, and Air Force. And they even sent copies to parts of Europe and the Middle East, in case this man maybe showed up in their towns or cities. According to this police chief, whose name was Les Brown, the man arguing with a young woman at the Barrowland Ballroom immediately prior to his arrest raised concerns of investigators, yet he was released from custody despite the fact that he closely resembled the composite and supplied police with a false name and address. Police said that the simple fact that this suspect did not have overlapping teeth was the reason why they dismissed him. Several years later, now this man's name was Les Brown, this police officer. Several years later, he spoke at length to a detective who had taken the same man to a hospital after arresting him outside of the Barrowland Ballroom. Although the suspect needed several stitches, as soon as the handcuffs were taken off of him, he escaped. Because he gave a false name, he escaped from the police, which is strange and odd in itself. This is also one reason that led people to believe they knew exactly who this guy was. And maybe their intention was to take him to the hospital, help him to get treatment for these cuts on his body, and then haul him away somewhere outside of the city, which leads more people to believe that this was a cover-up and that he was allowed to go free. So I'm going to wrap this part of the video up, and I know this has been a long story. It's hard to believe that he murdered 3 women and then just disappeared. Like I said, the last attack on this last woman, she put up a fight. The people that saw him later saw who they believed to be this man. Said he was disheveled, dirty, grass-covered, muddy, and had bloodstains and a scratch on his face. So it's possible that she maimed him fighting him and could have left a pretty bad scratch on his face. And he may have disappeared for a while, and he may have turned out elsewhere in the world and, killed more people. And it just wasn't connected. But I just want to wrap this part of the video up, and I hope you'll come back and watch the last part. I'm going to be talking in the next section of this story about the years that followed, and DNA, and people who investigated this on their own, and in circles that got together and investigated this, and who they believe covered up for this man, and who they believe this man was. Thanks for watching.